There's also a deliberate mix in the mix of the companies I'll be talking about to have both traditional and tech companies. A lot of times, those of us in tech, we call ourselves we are the new kids on the block. That the lessons of strategy in traditional business doesn't apply to us. And one of the things I'll be doing is to go back into history and talk about global marketplace and see lessons that even fintechs can apply in terms of the things we do. It has never been more true. Quoting and paraphrasing the wise man in the good book of Ecclesiastes, there are nothing so new under the sun, even in tech. Our first company today we're talking about is South African Breweries. South African Breweries is a very interesting story that has been described as a company that started from the mines heap of Johannesburg to becoming a global brewing colossus. Started and founded in the gold rush in the 1880s, selling beer to black miners and dominated the South African market. By the 1990s, South African Breweries had built a near dominant monopoly in the South African brewery market, and it needed to go abroad to build new inflections of revenue and growth. In this period, South African Breweries developed three key competencies. The first one is that it developed a competency about low-cost production and supply chain management, built at home in an environment of huge infrastructure challenge. Note that South African Breweries was focused on the black market, and the black market in South Africa is not as sophisticated as the white market. That's where it built its competency. Also in the closed market in the apartheid days. The second competency that South African Breweries built in South Africa was how to manage institutional and infrastructure weaknesses that are typical to emerging markets, managing volatility, currency risk, uncertainty. If you do business within apartheid, you never know what is going to happen. Those are the institutional context in which South Africa Breweries built its business, managing socio-political, institutional weaknesses and uncertainty. And the third competency that South African Breweries built was building business among non-affluent consumer market at scale. It was focused on the black market. That's where it was selling beer, and the black market is very similar to the kind of markets you find in any emerging markets or developing countries. Very different from the markets of Europe and America. So in 1990s, when the South African Brewery was going abroad, it deliberately elected that it was going to focus on Eastern Europe. So its focus in going abroad from South Africa was to focus on Eastern Europe, on countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and a whole lot of the countries that were coming out of communism in the 1990s. Why did it do this? It was because it recognized that the countries in Eastern Europe coming out of communism at the time have infrastructure and institutional weaknesses that were similar to its own market in South Africa. It also recognized that it could cope with those developing country infrastructure situation much better than brewery companies that were from Western Europe and North America if they were going to those markets. It also recognized that Eastern Europe had a large non-affluent consumer market coming out of communism that it could potentially build at scale, similar to the kind of things it had done in South Africa. The Eastern Europe was very unique. It was the least contested part of Europe. The market was large, different from Western Europe and North America, where the entrenched international resource players in brewery business are playing. So South African Breweries became a global player, developing a series of acquisition and consolidation of Eastern European breweries, and developing in that pattern, going through emerging markets, even traveling as far as going to India in Asia to become a strong global player. And with the success of building business for emerging markets, 10 years after he left South Africa, went to North America, a developed market for the first time, and acquired the third largest brewery in the US, the Millers, and became SAB Millers. So look at the pattern. It avoided the big guys, went across the world, Eastern Europe, India, became big, and when it now had muscle, building business for emerging markets, it now went to North America, acquired Millers, and became SAB Millers. Today, South African Breweries is now part of a larger business called AB InBev. It was acquired by AB InBev at $104 billion in 2016. That would be one of the most phenomenal creation of shareholder wealth value in any business. That between 1990 and 2016, in 25 years, it created $100 billion worth of shareholder wealth through a strategic consequence of moves across the world, building businesses in emerging markets and ending up in a developed market. A phenomenal story coming out of Africa. So what are the lessons that we can learn from South African Breweries in terms of navigating the global marketplace, which we are talking to tonight? There are three lessons. Number one is that to navigate the global marketplace, you should develop a strong competency at home that you can export abroad to the global marketplace. Lesson number two, you should identify and focus on markets that are similar to home, where your local competency is relevant. Lesson number three, avoid markets with players that are more resourced than you. Find and focus on least contested international markets. South African Breweries was not stupid when it didn't go to Western Europe and the US until it consolidated his businesses for emerging markets and become a global player. Case number